Welcome to Small Town Big Business, the podcast about having big success in small town America. And here tonight, we are broadcasting with a live studio audience at the Little Nashville Cafe in beautiful downtown Marion, Illinois. So I'm Jennifer Olson. I'm the Director of Business Development here for the City of Marion.
And I'm Deb Barnett. I'm the Executive Director for Southern Illinois Now. So that's a 17-county economic development initiative right here in Southern Illinois.
And I'm Russ Williams. I'm director of EThOs. EThOs is a small business incubator. We're co-working spaces, do training and development right here in downtown Marion, Illinois. In fact, right across the square is the Citadel building where EThOs is located. We want to thank all of our guests for being here again, but we also want to thank our listeners and our viewers, and especially our sponsors for the podcast that have been keeping us going for 3 years now.
Wow.
And we want to thank in particular Arcadia Wealth Group, Black Diamond Harley Davidson and RV. We want to thank Fowler Heating and Cooling. We want to thank Swinford Media Group, the Watermark Auto Group Foundation, Union Street Arts, which is our producer, and especially Luke O'Neill, who's recording us tonight.
And if you are a regular podcast listener, you may have already found us somewhere, but we are on all of the major platforms, including Podbean, Spotify, Apple, you name it, we are there. We are also on YouTube if you want to see the video component of this show. And what's most important, really two things. One, please subscribe so that you don't miss a single episode. If you haven't listened to prior episodes, go back, do yourself a favor and listen to those. And if you want to help us find more audience like yourself, please rate and review us and share your favorite episode.
And if you're new to Small Town Big Business, we interview successful business owners and founders about how and why they're successful in small towns, like right here in Marion, Illinois, and throughout Southern Illinois and across the Midwest. And today I am very, very excited to welcome our guest, a very special guest. Not only are we live at Little Nashville Cafe and we have our live audience, but we have inventor of Dippin Dots and founder of 40 Below Joe, Curt Jones. Can you all help me welcome Curt? So Curt, thanks. First of all, thank you for joining us, because I know you are a very busy man and you keep the roads hot. We were talking about that earlier, traveling back and forth from your home in Tennessee to here in Southern Illinois, where your business is. But let's start by just telling us a little bit about Curt. Tell us a little bit about your background and how it all got started here in Southern Illinois.
Okay, well, I actually was born in Southern Illinois. Grew up probably about 40 miles south of here. Grew up on a farm, went to Century High School and Shawnee College, and then Southern Illinois University. I've got 2 degrees at SIU. I got both are in microbiology. And microbiology, you usually think of medical and bacteria that make you sick, but I was always on the other side. I liked finding microorganisms that were good for you or good for the environment and things like that. So I studied things like fermentations and various other things, but it led me into a life of research and development. And probably about 1986 or so, I moved from Southern Illinois to Lexington, Kentucky, and I went to work for a company called Alltech. At the time, it was called Alltech Biotechnology Center, and they had just gotten into, basically, you've all heard of probiotics. It's very common nowadays, but we were making probiotics back in the 80s and putting it into animal feeds. And the reason we were doing that is because in the 70s and before, and in the early 80s, there was a lot of antibiotics being used on the farm, to keep their animals healthy. And so this was a natural alternative to keep the animals healthy, good bacteria outnumber bad bacteria in your digestive system. But the reason I'm going there is because I was in charge of growing all these little bacteria organisms in these large stainless steel fermenter tanks. And I was also in charge of the freezing and the freeze drying process. And the freezing step's very critical because you want to have a very small ice crystal formed when you freeze it, so that when you freeze dry it, the crystals don't puncture and kill the cells. And I'm getting a little bit technical here, but it's important because I started playing around with liquid nitrogen at that time because I wanted to get the quickest freeze possible. And it worked, and we converted our freezing system to that. And of course, when you make homemade ice cream, which I also like to do, you also want to make the smallest ice crystals possible when you're freezing something. And so obviously the two kind of collided, and that's kind of how I started making little beads of ice cream.
Did you fall into that discovery, or did you intentionally put some things together?
Well, a little bit of both. I mean, when I was making when I was freezing the cultures of bacteria, I didn't really care what they looked like. I was making, at first, like pouring nitrogen into the cultures, and then I was pouring the cultures into the nitrogen. But I found if you poured it in slowly, you would make little raindrops, and it would freeze into pellets, which also lets you pour it in and out of containers. It gave it more surface area to freeze dry. And of course, the ice cream part just came. I just got to thinking about, like I said, you want to make a small ice crystal when when you have your hand freezer and your ice and your salt, you're basically making large ice crystals, and you can taste it. Mm-hmm. So I just thought, well, why not try ice cream that way? So it was kind of a combination of the two.
Dippin Dots was born.
Yes.
What year was that?
That was 1987.
87.
Mm-hmm. Wow. So, not sure if I answered all of your questions.
Yeah, you did. Yeah, and so you grew up in Southern Illinois. Mm-hmm. You mentioned you went to university, so we're Salukis, Southern Illinois University.
I think we have some SIU students here.
Think we have some
That's
students
right.
here.
Yeah.
So you create something. Mm-hmm. That's a long way from getting it into the hand of the consumer. So can you kind of tell us how things go from there?
Yeah, I mean, in the beginning, it's really just, once you're kind of convinced, that you feel like you have something that's kind of neat, you start showing other people, first your family and then your friends. And so I did that, and I would get strange looks at first because at that time, all the ice cream was none of it was in beads at that time. So a lot of people thought I was like playing a joke on them. They wouldn't even hardly taste it. But once you get it in people's mouths, they kind of got the feeling of what we were doing. I stuck with my job for 6 months. I even went to my boss, who was very entrepreneurial himself, and asked him if he thought it was a good idea, if he wanted to get involved in any way. And he just kind of said, it's a good idea, but just get back to work. We're busy too. So the nights and weekends, I would work on it and play with it. And finally, in the middle of the winter, November, I finally just told my wife, I said, I really want to get into this, full time, because we had done a little bit of test marketing. We had rented a little spot for like 10 days and gave out samples and even sold a few cups. And we were getting good reactions, and people liked the product, and we were coming up with more and more flavors and more ideas on how to promote it. And finally, after about 6 months, we took our life savings of $10,000 and decided to quit a good job and open an ice cream store in the middle of the winter on the wrong side of town as well. So,
were you still in Lexington, Kentucky at the time?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. How did it come back here?
Well, what happened is during 1988, from March of 1988 through that year, my wife and I just worked at the store, and my daughter, she was 5 years old at the time, and just every day we would open an ice cream store, and I made the product in the back. And we started going outside of the store and kind of marketing it in other places. Even went down to Opryland Theme Park, which was in Nashville, and showed them what we were doing. They had a little bit of interest. But basically, my sister, Connie, she had been out of the area for a while, and she was wanting to come back into the area. She had just gotten married, and she has an MBA, which was kind of handy in the beginning if you're starting a business. And so between her and my mom and my dad back in Southern Illinois on the farm, they were trying to figure out how they could get involved and how they could help. So we took a garage that my wife and I used to own. It was on a piece of property right next to our farm. And they converted that into a small ice cream plant. And we actually got a license here in Illinois to manufacture. So we were doing this in my garage.
Wow.
And so they were going to be kind of the manufacturing arm while we did the store, and then also got into wholesaling the product.
Seems like a lot of technology for a garage.
Yeah. Well, a lot of the technology's in the equipment itself. So once we got that kind of figured out, and that was a process in itself. It was it went from being what could almost be like a cylindrical French fry machine type thing with a screen in it where you manually pulled it out every batch, to our experience on the farm, reminded me of watching soybeans being augered out. So we started adding some pieces to it and built a more of a continuous machine.
Wow.
So, but yeah, it's just started. I mean, that was our first real manufacturing facility, and then later we moved to Paducah, Kentucky, into a small 2,000 square foot building, and then we eventually built a Dippin Dot plant that's still there today.
Wow.
A few years later.
Okay.
So I've heard you tell your story many times, and I've been privileged to work alongside you over the last few years and get to know you at your manufacturing facility right here in Southern Illinois, just down the road in Carbondale. Mm-hmm. And I do want to jump into some of those new products, but before we do, I want to go back to those beginning days at Dippin Dots as well, because I've heard people ask you, Dippin Dots was this overnight success, or it appears as though, right?
Right.
And I've heard you tell the story that was not at all the case. So can you talk a little bit about that for people who are maybe looking to start a business, or they've stumbled on this, what they think is a great idea, like you shared?
Well, I usually start out by saying just keep your job, but no, if you've got the bug, I mean, you've got it. And, the first stages of a bit, and it depends on what type of business you start as well. I mean, but in our case, we were trying to build a business that we could, manufacture and wholesale a product, which is a whole different animal than some businesses. But I think it was much harder than we thought it would be, because, we love the product, our family loved the product, our friends loved the product, and even people we gave it to loved the product, but would they buy it? Mm-hmm. Would they buy it in large enough quantities to, sustain, all your overhead and your business? So it was just a big learning curve for the first few years, trying to figure out where to go. Because the real key is, I always say starting a business is kind of like a basketball game where you've got 4 quarters and you've got a certain amount of time before you run out of money. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of the way you got to play it, is like, I've got to make enough product that's got a margin on each unit. I've got to sell enough of that to where I've got enough money to keep everything open, and then that's kind of the way that you have to approach it. And it's very difficult in the beginning when you're trying to do that, because even you might have the best product, but if no one knows what it is, and this was before the internet, before
It's just
all
like that.
Yeah.
How did you ever make it without the internet?
Yeah, but it was really just getting. Well, what we finally figured out is that we weren't going to make it in our ice cream store. We were fortunate to get into Opryland the next year, but even there it failed for 2 years until we were able to come in and take over at Opryland and run it as our business. Because what you have to do is you have to get, in our case, we had to get out where there's people walking by. And we were about 25 feet off the beaten path, but we had to get out where we could get people to come over and try it. Mm-hmm. And then once you get people to the counter, you can kind of, talk to them, and they eventually will come back and buy something that later that day, if it's in the morning, or they might buy right then.
Yeah.
But it was just one by one, in the beginning.
Yeah. Well, I think I first experienced Dippin Dots at Opryland.
Okay.
And how big did you get? Because you were at other amusement parks. That was...
Yeah, what happened, we went into Opryland, and it's kind of a funny story how we got there, because, like I said, my sister Connie was working with us, and we knew that we had to get into something like that because, again, we have product that has to be kept at 40 below zero. So everywhere we sell product, we pretty much have to have a 40 below freezer, which can get expensive. Mm-hmm. So we kind of decided we couldn't be just in every little restaurant in town. We tried that. But we knew we had to go where we could sell a lot of volume through one freezer. So we started thinking about fairs and festivals, and then eventually theme parks. And so the first thing my sister did, we had rented this little office in Paducah. It was about, probably, 12 feet by 12 feet. We had 4 desks in there. And when I say desk, I'm talking about, chairs with a door laying on it, that kind of thing. But I remember she called Disney, why not start at the top? Mm-hmm. And they sounded kind of interested, but they started talking about how much they went through in a day, which was like a semi-truckload a day, or maybe 2 or 3. Mm-hmm. So we knew that probably wasn't for us. And she called Opryland, and you almost have to hear her tell the story, but everything that they would ask her, she didn't have a good answer for. It's like, Well, how long you been selling your product? Well, we haven't really sold it anywhere yet. Just on and on and on. But eventually, they wanted to see us in person, and so we went there. So we got into Opryland. We thought we had it made, and that's when we moved back from Lexington, because we thought, well, we've got to go back and get on the production side, and we're going to start wholesaling it out. They projected that they would sell 100 gallons a day. My machine would make 4 gallons an hour. So when I did the math, I thought, well, that's not going to work out. So we went back and concentrated on that side of it. But they only sold about 2 gallons a day. I mean, it was a very small amount because, again, they didn't know what our product was about. Nobody knew what the brand was. The second year, we came up with the idea with Opryland to put it in a kiosk, which is still working today, but it didn't work the first year because we found out later they didn't sell very much the second year, and they even asked if we would come and pick up all of our equipment. So that was kind of the low point. And they said, we like you guys, we like the product, it's just not selling. And I asked for a little background. I said, well, how much, I started asking them questions. What I found out is they had only opened the cart about 25 days out of the whole season. Yeah. And it was only on cloudy and rainy days when they had enough. But when they were busy, all their people were being used to sell their normal items. So we picked up all of our equipment. And the third year, which we didn't know there was going to be a third year, but what happened was one of the guys, when we were picking up the equipment, it just so happened that his dad was the general manager of the theme park. And he just kept saying, I just don't think you guys got a fair shake. I just wish we could have done something differently. And what happened, they had a new food service supervisor come in that year. And he said, I'm going to get you a meeting with him because he comes from a different side of the park where they, where you go through and play the games. And you, so a lot of people over there work kind of on commission and things like that. So we basically got a meeting and we went down. We worked out a deal to where we would give the park 25% of our sales, but we would run everything. And then we had to come up with $20,000, which we didn't have, to remodel a building to get in. And luckily we found a bank that did loan us the money. But the first day that we opened, it was snowing, but we still sold $300 worth of product. And that was more than almost any day we'd sold the year before.
On the cloudy days.
And then, and so then the next day, it got up to about 50 degrees. It was sunny, and it was a Sunday, and we sold $800. Okay. So we knew that we were kind of in a good place. And I think that year we ended up selling like $360,000 worth of product. Yeah. But what we found out, and the biggest part of it, was what we learned. And the food service supervisor was actually really good to work with because he would share everything with us. And the way that parks measure how something's working is by what they call per caps. So if you sell $1,000 worth of product and there's 10,000 people in the park, you've done a 10-cent per cap. So every person average spending 10 cents on your product. So we learned that. And then the other thing I learned was a term called additional spending. So what that means is that of that $360,000 that we sold, their ice cream sales only went down by $90,000. So we created that much additional spending for them. Yeah. So they were very happy with that. Now, that gave us the ammunition to go to other theme parks. Yeah. And so the next year we got into like 3 or 4 more theme parks. Yeah. And then the next year like 11 more, and then, kind of
awesome.
Started growing.
Sunny days came more often.
Yes.
That's awesome.
So you mentioned the 5-year-old when you started, and she is now an adult that is your partner in 40 Below Joe and some of the other products actually that we have here this evening. So tell us a little bit about what you're up to now with 40 Below Joe.
Sure. Yeah. Tracy was 5 when we opened the store. And so she lived all the Dippin Dot days, but she didn't really live the startup part of the business. I mean, she did, but she didn't really understand everything that was going on. And she liked going to the theme parks that we went to and tried to sell in and all that. But anyway, so later in life, I mean, probably back in 2016 or 17, we started, we rented a spot over at the Incubator at Carbondale at the Dunn Richmond Center. And my daughter, well, she's 40 now, just to kind of give you an idea of the time that's passed, but she wanted to be a part of starting a similar business to Dippin Dots. We sold Dippin Dots in 2012. I stayed with the company for 3 years, but we'd always had some ideas to do some other products. So we thought a lot of products could become beaded products. So we started with coffee, and so we And the way that got started, I'll come back to Tracy in a minute, but we had actually opened 4 Dippin Dots stores back in the like around 2007, 2008 timeframe, maybe a little bit before that. And we'd always thought we would put coffee in those stores in addition to the ice cream. And as I started talking to baristas and things at other coffee shops, they said, the thing you want to always do is make sure you pull a fresh shot of espresso. So you make your cappuccinos, your lattes, you want to make sure you've just ground the beans and you've run it through your espresso machine, and you take that and you mix it. And the reason is because it starts to change. Coffee kind of, changes when it sets out, and it's from the oxygen in the air. But it made me think, well, what would really happen if I took a fresh shot of espresso and then froze it at 320 below zero into beads? What would happen if you warmed it back up, an hour later or a day later or a month later? And so we did those experiments and found out that it actually locked in that freshness so that you can actually, taste this product even a year later if you keep it at 40 below zero, and it's got all that initial taste and flavor and everything. So the first idea is that we would go into the coffee business and we would basically sell a consumer at home a bag of coffee beads, or if someone wanted to open a coffee kiosk, they wouldn't have to purchase a very expensive espresso machine. They could just have a steamer, bring it back to life. And you can make anything that Starbucks can make, except you can do it faster because you're not going through all that preparation. So that's how we started the business. And so my daughter, Tracy, she has been and still is, she does all of our branding and marketing and everything. So any of the logos and things that you see, she doesn't create logos herself, but she basically manages all of that. But probably a year or so into it, we were at SIU, and I think there was getting ready to be an alumni meeting up in Chicago, and I was asked if we would serve our coffee there. And so I got to thinking about, well, how am I going to heat that much water? I haven't really got that far along. I could get a steamer. But we had just started playing around with the creamer portions, for people that like to add, like if they wanted a salted caramel flavor, we started playing with making creamers out of coconut milk and almond milk. We wanted to stay non-dairy. At the time, mainly because I didn't want to go right into the face of Dippin Dots. But as it turns out, there's a really big demand for non-dairy products. But we got to thinking, well, what if we just mix the beads with the coffee beads and just let people eat it? And so that's what we did, and it went over real well. So we just have spent most of our time marketing the coffee that way. Mm-hmm. And it's called 40 Below Joe, by the way.
And where do you sell that product?
Well, we sell it on the internet, so we've shipped to all 48 states. We don't ship to Alaska and Hawaii, but we also have put it in some coffee shops and grocery stores, and you can actually go on our website and go to whatever state you're in, and it'll show some of the sites that we're at. But from that, we've also gotten into some other products too. Another product that I'd been working on along with the coffee was a product called Island Rocks, which is everything you need to make a margarita. You just add the tequila. And then, of course, we did a pina colada that you add rum to. We do a strawberry daiquiri and a mango margarita. So that can come as a mocktail where you can just eat it as a kind of a refreshing non-alcoholic drink, or you can add alcohol to it. We can also add alcohol to it up to 15 proof if you keep it in a 40 below freezer. We haven't quite sold it that way yet because it gets a little more complicated when you have to start dealing with all the alcohol laws and all that. And then from that, we've kind of expanded into other things too. So I can talk about that whenever you want me to. But
So I heard formal degree. I heard School of Hard Knocks. Try it until it works. Mortgaged all the things. What are the other components of success? Resources, people power, tools?
I think one thing that I always tell people if they're getting ready to start a business is make sure you really believe in what you're doing and what your idea is, because it's easy. And I get ideas all the time, but I kind of do the 48-hour test. I'll kind of write it down somewhere. I'll come back in 48 hours and see if it sounds as exciting as it did. Mm-hmm. And
That's
usually
a good
it doesn't.
Test. I'll have to remember that test.
But when you first come up with an idea, it's like, oh, this is the best thing ever, and it's not always. But I think that's the first thing, is that you really got to believe in what you're doing, because not only are you going to invest, a lot of time and a lot of your own money, but other people around you are going to do the same thing, whether it's your wife or your daughter or your family or somebody that's investing money in you. So you want to, don't be scared of that. I mean, just know that you really think it can work. I mean, you got to really ask that hard question. And then you got to really be willing to, at that point it's 24/7. There's no 8 to 4 anymore. It's like, you're going to be waking up at 1 o'clock in the morning with an idea, putting a note in your phone or whatever it might be. So.
Any other lessons for young entrepreneurs that have that spirit or idea?
Well, luckily we do live at the age of the internet now, so people can get on and do a lot of research, and there's of course ways to market things that way. I think again, I always come back to it's just really a matter of believing in what you're doing and being willing to work hard and not give up, because I mean, maybe there's times when you do need to give up if it's just not going to work, but I'm just saying you get knocked down a lot as an entrepreneur or someone starting a business. I mean, they don't make it easy on you. I mean, it's just not easy to do a business. There's just a lot of components that have to come together. But you're going to get offended. You're going to get disrespected in your own mind, and people don't really do that on purpose all the time. It's just that, I mean, you can literally be. I could set samples out on a counter, and if I'm standing there and, most people like what you do, but sometimes you'll get, that just don't taste very good, or, you just got to be able to kind of grow some thick skin, I think.
And why Southern Illinois? We're such a rural community. Why keep the business or start the new businesses here?
Well, I think there's a lot of reasons, really. I mean, at first we thought we were going to have our business in Lexington. We were planned on staying there. We liked where we lived and everything. And I mean, did it make sense to move back to Grand Chain of 250 people, or Lexington that had, probably close to 1 million people? But on the other hand, when we moved back here, we had a lot of support, from people that we knew and family, and for the type of business that we grew. I mean, Southern Illinois is a really good place because of, if you're in the distribution business, you're in a good place, as far as getting product out other places. But I mean, I think you can start a business anywhere, but I think for us, it just, it was kind of like, we just knew that we had more infrastructure here, that we could call on people that we knew, and also people, needed jobs too. Mm-hmm. And I'm probably different than a lot of people. I mean, I know a lot of people would probably interview like 30 people before they hired someone, but we always just hired people as they became available. Mm-hmm. And a lot of times it was like, good people that might have lost a job or whatever. And it wasn't so much about what your qualifications were for what we do, but we felt like we could always, if you had the right attitude and you really wanted to work, then we could probably find something for you.
Does that speak towards your why you do what you do, or is it something other?
I mean, it's part of that. I mean, I will say that one of the, it's great that Dippin Dots became a national brand, and you can even buy it in other countries. But I think for me, one of the proudest things is that, there's still 250 people that work for Dippin Dots. And I know a lot of them came out of, Pulaski, Alexander, Massac counties, Johnson County. And I knew that it was, there's, especially back then, there wasn't just there was other jobs, but this was just some more, that people could do.
Well done. That's awesome.
I want to go back a minute to the resources that Jennifer asked about. And I think one of the great resources that we have here in Southern Illinois are our incubators. So Russ is at EThOs over at the Citadel, right across from where we're recording today. And you have co-working space, all kinds of business resources. And then just right down the road at SIU Carbondale, there is a business incubator, which is where we met and where you started Beaded Distribution, 40 Below Joe. And one of the stories I want to tell, because I know we have some SIU students in the audience, is one of my favorite stories is a student that came to you, I think just an accounting major. She was just going to do some bookkeeping for you. And over the course of a couple of years, she ended up learning every single aspect of your business in and out, from shipping. I think She helped with one of the first international shipping and how all of that worked out. And it really is such a great just learning experience for students to come in and really learn the ins and outs of a business. But can you speak a little bit to how the incubator has kind of helped you get the business launched and then continue with that research and development?
Yeah, I mean, right after I left Dippin Dots and I knew I had these ideas for the coffee and the island rocks especially, and I was just literally going to rent like a 250 square foot room to start just having a place to throw down and, start working on some things. And then I think the first day I came in to rent it, a 900 square foot room came available. It had some plumbing and stuff. And I thought, well, I'm going to need that too. And
because that, if I could interject, that incubator there has co-working space, but it also has light manufacturing space and office space and all those kinds of things.
But what's really nice about it too, not only do you get all the support of the people that work there, including you at the time, but you also have the just a lot of things that you have to have when you start a business. I mean, like a place that when you leave at night that, it's got security, it's got it's electricity to try different things. And so there's just a lot of pieces that you need that lets you focus on what you do. And then when it's time to look for financing or other things, you can always just go down the hall and talk to someone and say, hey, do or if you need to hire someone, or if you want to work with some students, like, do you know anybody over in the such and such department? So, to me, it really works out nice. And especially at SIU. SIU's, I always think of it as kind of you can think of it in a lot of different ways, but the way I grew up and went to school there is we had a lot of focus on research and developmental type things. And I think there's an entrepreneurial spirit there that you don't have probably at every university.
And I think that was one of my favorite parts because every time, I wouldn't say every day, but a lot of times you or one of your employees would come down the hall and say, we've been working on this new product today and so we would get to be the taste testers.
Yes.
So that was always exciting. And
right.
And knowing you, there was always an idea brewing, as you mentioned, always a new idea and a new product.
Yeah, and I like being at the university for that as well. Not that we go and talk to a professor every day or anything like that, but if you do have an idea, you do have that resource that you can go sometimes just to see if do you think this is a good idea. And
I'm happy to try any products here in Marion, by the way.
Yeah, we've got plenty.
We have plenty.
So what does the future hold?
Well, speaking of products, so we got 40 Below Joe, which is coffee-based, made with real coffee and non-dairy creamers. We've got the Island Rocks, which are the mocktails, or you can call them you can blend them with your own alcohol. But then we got into something that was kind of interesting. When I was a student at SIU, I did various things, but one project I got involved in one time was making basically, we were taking canning waste from Del Monte. We had a little $500 grant. I always remember this. And my project was to turn this canning waste into something. And so growing up on a pig farm, I thought, well, I'd always like to work with anaerobic digesters, and I wanted to see if I could make methane gas out of it. And so I played with that for a while, but it also linked me up with I don't even know if they're still there. They're probably not, but there was a little, in the chemistry department, there was a organization called Pollution Control, and they were doing various projects around campus. But one project they were working on was Prairie Farms was making cottage cheese, which they still do, and sour cream. But one of their byproducts of that is the milk water that's left over, which is referred to as whey. And back then, I think they were trying to figure out how much of it they could actually put down into the drains and how much the water plants could sustain of that, because it has a lot of organic matter in it. And I was playing around with that a little bit. But anyway, you fast forward many decades, and I got to thinking, I wonder if they're still basically throwing this away. And so I knew the CEO of Prairie Farms because we used to buy a lot of ice cream mix from them. And he said, oh, yeah. He said, we're still getting rid of it, and we give it to farmers and things like that. So I went and got some of it, and we started playing with it. And we make a product now called the Fruity Whey. And I don't know if that's a good name for it, but it's basically what it is. It's basically we add fruit to this cottage cheese whey. It sounds horrible, but it's really not. It's really
very
good.
good.
And
so good.
it's better than adding fruit to like water and freezing it. But the whey has dissolved minerals and vitamins and protein, so it gives it a little bit more of a nutritional kick. And then we have another product called Whey to Go, which is kind of the same thing, but it's got no sugar added, but it also has whey protein powder added to it. So we can actually, in a little serving like you see back there, we can get up to about 8 grams of protein. So it's a way to, the market we think that we're going to go get into will be like gyms and weightlifting places, maybe prisons where there's a lot of weightlifting going on, but also eventually nursing homes and hospitals where you're looking for a protein snack. But the Fruity Whey, by the way, is we're getting ready to go into schools because there's a new program. Well, it's called the Smart Snack Program, and a lot of the things that you used to be able to buy in schools, you can't really buy there anymore because they want healthier products. And so our product happens to meet a lot of those standards. So we're doing a lot of school trade shows now, and we're getting ready to take product in where it can be sold in schools. But the last product that we came out with, the 5th brand, if you will, is called 40 Below Desserts. And basically what we've done is I've been away from Dippin Dots long enough to where I'm kind of like basically coming back in with a lot of products we developed at Dippin Dots. So if you had cookies and cream or banana split or cotton candy, those types of things, we're starting to make those products now, but we're making them non-dairy at this point. So everything's made out of coconut milk, almond milk, and eventually we'll make some out of oat milk. But those are kind of the directions we're kind of going into now. Oh, I will say one more thing, and we've been under NDAs on this, but we are still under some but we're also talking to a lot of at least 3 different companies that's got some really neat projects coming up. And the one I think I can talk about is there's a group out of Florida that has gotten the license from Mattel to do Barbie products. And we're going to basically do a beaded Barbie package, and they're going to sell them in a lot of mostly vending machines, I think, starting out. So all that's kind of in the works now, but we've got some really neat designs, and I don't know if I've showed you those yet or not, but they're kind of cool.
No, I think I heard about it just a little bit of a while back, but I wasn't sure if you were able to share. But I mean, really, the possibilities are endless. So you're going to need a larger notepad next year. Next year,
and more people to try out products.
That's
by the
right.
way,
That's right.
So that's not a completely done deal, but it's
Sure.
far enough along where we've shared designs back and forth and with Mattel and different things. So we feel pretty good that it could happen in 2024. But if it doesn't, there'll be something else. So.
Excellent.
So I know you're inspiring to a lot of people and encouraging to entrepreneurs. Do you have anybody that inspires you or cheerleads you, or any favorite authors or podcasts that help you out?
Well, I tell you, I was actually asked to be on a podcast one time by a guy named Guy Raz. He does a podcast called How I Built This. And I was really impressed with him. I did the interview back in 2019, and it was over at SIU, actually. And he was in California. But he interviewed me for about 3.5 hours.
Wow.
And I thought, oh, man, I don't know what this is going to turn out like. This could be really bad. It could be really good. It could be, I just didn't know. But before he aired it, he sent me a copy of it. And I thought he did a really good job, because I have some ups and downs in my story. And I think he handled those real well and asked the right questions and made it easy for me to talk about it. But then he invited me later to come out to one of his. He does a lot of, and by the way, he's interviewed some major people. I mean, founders of Starbucks, Southwest Airlines, all these different ones. But he invited me to come out to a show that he put on in California, and I was just as a guest. But I got to know him a little bit, and it was really. He's really a neat guy, and I think he's got a really neat, and he will only interview founders of companies. Mm-hmm. So that made it kind of interesting. But, I mean, I have a lot of people that have inspired me over the years. I mean, but a lot of times it's not like the most successful business in the world. It's just people that are hardworking, honest, just watching their work ethics and what they did even in a local community. Like I grew up around a little place called Hoots Drive-In, which was a good friend of our family were good friends with them, but they had a little restaurant for 42 years out in the middle of nowhere. But it was like the place that everybody hung out after high school basketball games, but just little things like that. Because I really remember going and talking to Hoot and Linda Parker about when I was wanting to start Dippin Dots, like, they were teaching me, like, what your cost of goods should be, and just little things like that. Just so
Mentorship makes all the difference.
it does, yeah.
Well, Curt, before we wrap up this interview, we've got a live audience, as we said, here at the Little Nashville Cafe in Marion, Illinois. And this is your chance. Our guests are in the room to ask a question. Would you take a question from our audience or two? Does anybody have a question that they'd like to ask Curt? Fair game? Anything fair game? Yeah, maybe.
Yeah, sure.
Any questions for any of us?
There you go.
What's the worst flavor you ever tried with Dippin Dots?
Okay, the worst flavor.
I think it was, we were trying to do some like Mexican flavors. I think horchata maybe might have been. I don't think it tasted like what it should have or something, but that was one. And then there was probably another one. I was trying to think. There was another one that I didn't really like, but most of them, it's hard to make sugar and fat taste bad. Not to be honest with you.
Another question? We've got students here. They should be asking questions, right? Now they're shaking their head.
They don't get extra credit for that.
That's right. Well, Curt, very interesting. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Thank
I'll give another hand to
been a pleasure.
Curt
Thank
Jones.
you.
We'll pause and ask, do you guys have any more questions, or do you have anything that you wanted to cover
Yeah, anything we forgot?
Did we
to
miss
ask?
anything?
that we
Luke?
forgot to ask?
No,
Yes, we have
Yes, we
samples,
do.
and
We
we're
should
going to
do
try
that. Yeah,
those.
they're going to melt if you guys don't try
Yeah.
them. And I think we have some of everything. So we may not have the way to go, which is the high protein version, but we got everything else. We've got
Okay, excellent.
the Dippin' Dot desserts. I mean, not Dippin' Dot, 40 Below desserts.
Yeah. Well, we're going to do our last segment here to wrap up, and then we'll take a break, and you guys can enjoy the treats here. So we want to thank everyone for being part of the Small Town Big Business podcast community by listening and watching our podcast, especially today to our live audience. Thank you to our sponsors, Arcadia Wealth Group, Black Diamond Harley Davidson and RV, Fowler Heating and Cooling, the Swinford Media Group, Watermark Auto Group Foundation, and of course, Union Street Arts. Thank you very much to Luke O'Neill, who is our producer, makes us sound and look really good on our podcast. If you want to know more about EThOs, I'm Russ Williams. I'm director of EThOs. We're a small business incubator, co-working spaces, and training and development here in downtown Marion, Illinois. As I said, right across the street at the Citadel building. But you can contact me at russell@watermarkethos.org.
And I'm Deb Barnett, again, Executive Director for Southern Illinois Now. You can find us on all the social media platforms, but also at southernillinoisnow.org.
And I'm Jennifer Olson, Director of Business Development for the City of Marion. You can find me at City Hall, or you can get my contact information off LinkedIn. And just a reminder, don't forget to subscribe on your favorite podcast app. And if you like what we're doing, please share your favorite episode with somebody who will enjoy it. Appreciate you all.
Thank you for joining us.
Have a great day.
Thank you.
Well done.
Thank you, Curt.